Hello, everyone. Welcome to SOLA Network. My name is Hannah Chao. I'm an editor here. And today we're having a conversation with Pastor Scott O, who is at Rooftop Church. He's going to share with us about Afghanistan, and he's worked there and he has a great heart for the country. So Scott, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. Hello, SOLA. My name is Scott. I'm a local church pastor here in the city of Brea. My church and I have been here about 4 years, and would like to just share about my time in Afghanistan. I have lived in Afghanistan for 3 years, dating all the way back to 2004 to 2007. At that time, I was commissioned by then my home church to serve at an orphanage in a city in Afghanistan, and my biggest project was to oversee the orphanage building project. At that time, we were housing about 30 Afghan orphans, and the project was to build a bigger facility and house up to 120, 150 Afghan orphans in the region that I was living in. However, my time of those 3 years was cut short because of a terrorist attack by the Taliban in the month of July of 2007. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but there was a kidnapping incident that involved 23 South Koreans. They were short-term workers that were commissioned, and they were captured by the Taliban, and unfortunately, 2 of them ended up being executed. So because of that incident, many missionaries of the South Korean nationality were forced out within just months of that time. And at that time, I wasn't an American citizen. I was a South Korean citizen, and because of that reason, I was actually in Dubai. I had a short-term team with me, ready to enter Afghanistan, but the incident happened at the time that as we were waiting in Dubai, so I was denied entrance. So what should have been a 1-month furlough ended up being indefinite. And I was never able to go back and return to the land of Afghanistan. So I just found out recently that many kids at the orphanage that I was working with my wife, they really never got a full clarification of what had occurred. And so that's just kind of my experience of how my time was, and that is my connection with Afghanistan.
Yeah, so we know that Afghanistan's been going through just turmoil. The U.S. military just finished pulling out its troops. We know the Taliban has taken over the government. So I'm sure you're always watching the news and keeping in touch with people there. What is the current situation in Afghanistan like, both for the people and for Christians?
Yeah, like you, I'm just trying to gather as many much information or many resources as possible through different media outlets. And I think as outsiders looking in, we are curious of what is going to happen. We are fearful of what might happen. But when I talk to the people in Afghanistan, the reaction is quite different, in the sense that the fear of the Afghan people is not so much of the unknown, but rather the known. You have to understand that these people have lived through the Taliban regime nearly 2 decades ago, just a really brutal regime where daily life is filled with unbearable tension. We're talking about regular public executions, oppression for women, and everyone living in the entire land of Afghanistan. They fear that knock at the door that could come anytime, any day, and they would just heap just greater suffering to the general population. I would say the fear and the tension is at its highest right now.
What about for Christians? I know Afghanistan doesn't have a lot of Christians in the population, but I know that they are there. So what is it like for them?
I don't know the exact numbers, but I think the statistics years back when I did spend time, I think those numbers still hold quite true. So Afghanistan has 99.7 Muslims there. So that's less than 0.3% that is comprised of different religions. And Christianity is the utmost, probably the greatest minority religion there. I think the last research I did is anywhere from 10,000 to 12,000 Christians. And unlike any other, most like other countries that ban Christianity, every single one of these Christians gather in underground churches. And even underground churches probably do not have larger corporate gatherings where they can freely express or worship God. But so it's very hidden. And even during my time, nearly 2 decades ago, I had seen very few Christians. And even in my own context of ministry, the number of converts that I work with, very little. So we are talking extreme minority in that land. What I'm hearing through different podcasts and news, unlike what we fear, unlike just the anxiety that the Christians all over the world have concerning the Christians in Afghanistan, they're doing quite well. Their spirits are high, and they're very glad for just the opportunity to continue to worship God, to be faithful in their faith lives. And in fact, they're urging the Christians all over the world to be even stronger in our places of faith and continue to lift them up, not lessening of persecution, but greater power, so that they may overcome what they're seeing over there. But my context there, they are not Christians. And, my context right now are former kids that we did help raise when they were much younger. At the time when my wife and I left the compound, we housed kids from ages ranging from 3 to 14, and 2 in particular that we were able to get in contact with are now 22 and 26. So much have changed, and it's just really surreal to hear from them what their experiences are like.
So for them, are they continuing to work with the orphanage, or are they just trying to survive under the Taliban? What's it like for those people that you do know in Afghanistan?
Yeah, so the orphanage project, so I shared that in 2007, I was denied entrance. So my successor had continued the work, but even that operation had to be folded completely around 2012. So we had surrendered the government, the orphanage building to the government, and it became a government-run orphanage. At that time, many of the kids were returned to their distant relatives, obviously because they did not have both sets of parents. And one in particular that I was able to get in touch with, I'll share 2 stories of 2 kids. One, we'll call him Daniel for the security reasons. He shared about 3 years of working for the Korean embassy, shortly after I had left. So my successor created an opportunity, because he was one of the oldest boys, that his time was coming near where he would eventually have to leave the compound. So he had worked 3 years at an orphanage. And, when this at the embassy, he was, I think, according to him, he was washing dishes, washing clothes, and his main occupation was to basically make life easier for the government workers. But thankfully, one of the contacts that he had made at that time remembered him. So when this ordeal happened, and when the Korean government was planning this rescue operation, give them some credit. They were, according to my contact Daniel, they were doing this at least a couple months prior to the actual incident where the Taliban completely took over. So he was fortunate enough to be been added onto that list. So he and his wife were granted traveling documents, and as you would have seen in the news and the video clips on the internet, he made his way to the airport, and he and just 6 other families were kind of waiting and camping outside. And he had wrote down on a piece of paper in a cardboard box, Korea, and that's all he had. He said he just paced back and forth back and forth where other government workers would see the Afghans waiting for some kind of response and help. And about 3 hours of doing that, he was waved in by the Korean workers, and he showed his documentation, and he was one of the 390 people that boarded the charter plane or the plane, and now he's in Korea, staying
Wow.
safely in a hotel for 14-day quarantine. And I don't think he has ever left the country prior to this. In fact, I know for sure that he had never been on an airplane either. So that's kind of his first experience. And we've been talking, video chatting, and his wife, who's 7 months pregnant and is dealing with the change in scenery, the change in food, and now they have no idea what tomorrow holds, except they're going day by day at a time with announcements and the information that's given to them.
Wow. And then you said you had another story you wanted to share?
Yeah. So that's the fortunate story. So I'm really happy for Daniel. And another story that I want to tell is a girl named Jenny. And she's been reaching out to us over the past a few days, quite aggressively, I think every night. I don't think she's aware of the time difference either. But for her, she's pretty much trapped in not only in her city, but also trapped in her home, because understanding the reality of what the Taliban might do, she has not really left the house for any reasons. And in fact, her older brother, her dad, who are the breadwinner of the family, they've also come home and are reluctant to leave the house because of the fear of what might happen. You have to understand, the Taliban are bad people, and they're notorious, and they have no regard for your safety, your well-being, and they're completely unpredictable, or predictable in a sense that because we have seen what they've done. So she spends all of her time at home. So she keeps asking, like, is there anything, Coco, which means uncle. It's like, Coco, can you do something? Can you do anything? We have spent time in the past. Can you tell? You used to work for the government in the past, and that was kind of like my secret identity in the past as well, without any full disclosure. Say, well, can you tell your friends and your government to help me get out of this country? And unfortunately, Hannah, they don't really know the reality of, the U.S. pulling out. They don't really know, and no one's really telling them that, hey, it's because for the past 20 years, no significant progress has been made, and those are the reasons, or what have you. All they're thinking is that, hey, there's bad people affecting our lives and destroying our lives, and we don't feel safe. Why isn't anyone doing anything about this? So, and it's really heartbreaking, and for me, and I'm frustrated, and I'm so sad, because it's not just Jenny. There's so many people, and I'm getting messages from my former driver asking the same thing. Can you get me out of this country? I say, you can't. I can't do anything. And then this morning, the message came saying, well, what if I got to Iran? What if I ran away to Pakistan? And either would involve him risking his life. And what if I got to those countries? Then would you be able to get me out? So the people that are inside the country of Afghanistan right now, they're living with uncertainty of their lives are not promised. Many of them don't know if they would live like how long.
Yeah, that's really heartbreaking that, there's so few options. And yeah, the reality is just so difficult. So yeah, if could you then share with us just how are ways we could pray for Afghanistan? Do you have any things that you would want us to kind of put at the top of the list?
Oh man, we had a prayer meeting with my church folks last night, and we dedicated our monthly prayer gathering for praying for Afghanistan. And I shared these 4 things, and It'll be really quick. And I think the first and foremost, my prayers are for the safety of all civilians. So, and particularly women. And Hannah, I mentioned to you that living under the regime of the Taliban, it's terrible. It's unbearable. But from my experience in talking to the Afghan people, it's far worse for women. If you're the ages of 16 to 40, you're living with a constant fear of that. You can be snatched, you could be plucked away from your own family and be forced into marriage or into terrible things, and their lives are not going to be guaranteed. So first and foremost, you can pray for the safety of all Afghan people. Second, for the Taliban to be eradicated and completely removed from any power or any influence in the land of Afghanistan. I think you have to understand that I personally think they're the equivalent of, the Nazis in the past, where they're not to be trusted. They're not to be handed any kind of power over any region, any city, or any particular place in the world. And I will also pray for the Christians to continue to persevere in their faith. Again, there are about 10,000 to 12,000 people, and for them to, I really believe that the current persecution, even heavier persecution, apparently, Hannah, the Taliban have a list of these Christians, so they're coming after them, and they're going to be hot on their pursuit. But I really do believe that in the same way that we have seen in the New Testament, and particularly the book of Acts, persecution in Jerusalem, in the nearby cities, it drove the Christians outside to evade out of the safety of their own lives. But that's exactly what caused the growth of the Christian church in other regions, in other greater areas all over Europe and Asia. So I'm praying for that. As these Christians being persecuted persevere in faith, I know that God will continue to advance his kingdom. And fourth and last, I want to say, for those that have the power or have the ability to relieve the suffering in that land, to move swiftly and wisely and powerfully. I don't know. I don't know what country that is. I don't know what organization or group of people, but if I understand how God works throughout time, God always uses people. There are always agents which he uses in delivering suffering, relieving suffering all throughout the land. So I'm praying for four of those things.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing those. I think those are really concrete, prayer requests that we can bring up to God, whether individually or with our churches or with our community groups. Is there anything else you want to just share or exhort our SOLA listeners and readers about Afghanistan?
Yeah, I think I hope this video is reaching some of you guys. And the opportunity came to me in 2004. I had committed my life to serve God overseas, and the clear voice from God that came to me was just go home and serve the church. And the highest agenda item for the church at the time happened to be Afghanistan, and I went. And I know in the same way that these stories, what you're seeing in that country, I know that it may inspire some of you. And I pray that if you can't commit the time, obviously none of us can go now, but begin committing your time and continuing to learn about what's going on there. And also I received another message from a Facebook friend. We're not even that close, but because he had seen my post about Afghanistan, he connected me to an individual that is now going to work with Afghan refugees that are going to be placed in somewhere in Orange County. So they're collecting clothes and some necessary items for life. So there will be ways where you can help and your church community can help. So I think as someone who shares deeper connections with Afghanistan, it would be wonderful if there are more of you joining us in that endeavor.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Scott. And we'll be praying for Afghan people and the country, and yeah, finding ways to support our brothers and sisters there too. Thank you so much.